It was supposed to be just another Tuesday morning. Emily Davis, a 26-year-old waitress with tired eyes and a generous heart, had just stepped behind the counter of Maple and Pine, a small roadside diner nestled off Route 89 in rural Ohio. The bell over the door had barely finished its soft jingle when she tied her red apron around her waist and poured the first pot of steaming coffee. Outside, the sky was blanketed in thick clouds, and a gentle drizzle danced across the glass windows. The booths were still empty, save for a pair of long-haul truckers in the far corner, quietly scrolling through their phones while waiting for eggs over easy. A slow country song played low from the jukebox in the corner. It was peaceful, familiar, ordinary, but within the ordinary, sometimes something extraordinary begins. Before we continue this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment your thoughts at the end. Stories like this deserve to be remembered, and your support helps us bring more to life. At 6:32 a.m., just as Emily was wiping down the counter for the second time, a man pushed open the door. The bell gave a sharp ring and she glanced up out of habit. He looked about 80, maybe older, thin, hunched with a grey coat that had clearly seen decades of Ohio winters. His boots were worn smooth, the leather cracked like old paper. In one hand he carried a newspaper, its corners soaked by the rain. In the other a cane with a split rubber tip. He moved slowly, like gravity was heavier on him than on everyone else. He didn't look up. He walked straight to the booth nearest the window, corner seat facing the exit, and sat down with the soft exhale of someone who'd walked farther than he should have. Emily approached with a practiced smile, but something about the man gave her pause. His eyes didn't search the menu, they didn't scan the room. He looked out the window, hands wrapped around the cup she placed in front of him, like it was more than just coffee, like it was warmth, or comfort, or maybe even hope. "Just coffee?" she asked gently. He nodded once. "Yes, ma'am, that'll be all." His voice was fragile but clear, like a memory spoken aloud. Emily refilled his cup once, then again. He never touched the menu, never ordered toast or eggs, just sat there, sipping quietly, watching the rain paint slow trails down the glass. At 7:24, she dropped off the check, $2.10 standard for a bottomless cup. She watched from the corner of her eye as he fumbled in his coat pocket for coins. He pulled out a crumpled $5 bill, then hesitated. Emily could see the indecision on his face. Pay now and have almost nothing left, or wait until later. And maybe not have the chance. Before he could decide, she stepped forward, picked up the slip and smiled. "It's on me today," she said simply. The old man blinked. "I couldn't—" "You can," she said gently but firmly. "It's just coffee." He looked at her, eyes narrowing just a bit. There was something behind them. Not suspicion, not pride, something deeper. A mix of surprise and quiet recognition. "Thank you, Emily." Her stomach dropped slightly. She hadn't told him her name. He stood slowly, folding the damp newspaper under one arm and placing the $5 bill on the edge of the table. With a slight nod, he turned and walked out into the misty grey morning. No further words, no dramatic goodbye, just the soft ring of the doorbell and the sound of boots on wet concrete fading into silence. Emily stood there for a moment, oddly unsettled. She picked up the bill, still warm from his hand, and tucked it into the tip jar. She didn't know why he'd chosen her booth, why he hadn't ordered food, why he'd known her name. But by lunchtime, the thought had drifted to the back of her mind. Maple and Pine always had a dozen stories unfolding at once, and the rhythm of the diner soon swallowed the moment. That night, as she locked up and stepped into the chilled dusk, she thought about him again, about how lonely he had looked, about the way he held the cup. She wondered fleetingly if she'd ever see him again. She would, but not like she expected. The next morning, before the first shift change, before the kitchen had even finished prepping, the batter for pancakes, 3 large black SUVs pulled into the gravel parking lot. Emily noticed them first. She had been adjusting the blinds when the engines rolled in, smooth, dark, and too polished for a town like theirs. All 3 vehicles parked in perfect unison, their tinted windows reflecting only the grey sky. The diner, usually sleepy at this hour, suddenly felt smaller, tighter. The engines cut off one by one. No one stepped out at first. Emily's heart pounded. This wasn't normal. It wasn't federal agents, at least not the kind she'd seen in movies. It wasn't local cops, either wrong style, too sharp. These were the kind of cars you'd expect to see outside a Pentagon briefing room or at a private airport. The bell over the door hadn't even rung yet, but she already knew this was about more than coffee, and somehow she knew it had everything to do with the man from yesterday. Emily Davis didn't scare easily. She had worked double shifts through snowstorms, diffused shouting matches between impatient customers, and spent nights walking home through pitch-black side streets when her car wouldn't start. Life had tested her more times than she could count, and most days she passed those tests quietly without fanfare. But that morning, standing behind the counter of Maple and Pine, watching 3 black SUVs pull into the gravel lot like pieces in a chess game, something in her gut twisted. She had never seen vehicles like that in Willow Creek, not since a senator had come through town a decade ago during campaign season. These weren't town police or state troopers. No decals, no flashy lights, just polished dark metal and tinted windows that reflected only the grey sky above. The diner was mostly empty. Danny was at the griddle, flipping bacon while humming through one side of his headphones. Linda was refilling the napkin holders at the far booths. No one else seemed to notice yet. But Emily knew something unusual was happening. She could feel it crawling up her spine. The engines went silent all at once. That in itself was unsettling. Seconds passed. Then the bell above the door gave its familiar ring. 2 men entered first. Their movements were precise, their posture rigid. Both wore dark suits, identical black ties, and the unmistakable glint of communication earpieces tucked behind their ears. They didn't look around out of curiosity. They scanned, the kind of glance trained to spot threats, exits, patterns. Following behind them came a third man. He was older, grey-haired with a square jaw and eyes that missed nothing. His suit was impeccable. The American flag pin on his lapel sat perfectly above a narrow nameplate clipped to his chest. Commander Richard Hargrave. Emily wiped her hands on her apron, trying to calm the sudden tremble in her fingers. The men walked with purpose, straight toward her, as if they already knew exactly who she was and what she looked like. "You're Emily Davis?" Hargrave asked. His voice was firm, authoritative, but not aggressive. It had the controlled tone of someone used to getting answers. She nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. I'm Commander Hargrave, Department of Civil Affairs." She blinked. "I don't know what that is." "It's all right. Most civilians don't. May we speak privately?" Danny looked up from behind the counter, spatula, mid-air. "She in some kind of trouble?" Hargrave offered a nod, neither confirming nor denying anything. "Just a conversation." Emily felt the weight of the entire diner watching her. She glanced nervously toward Linda, who gave a small shrug. The moment was surreal. Hargrave gestured toward the booth in the back. Emily moved with cautious steps, her pulse thudding in her ears. The 2 suited men stood at either end of the diner, flanking her like bookends. Hargrave slid into the seat across from her, setting a leather folder on the table. Inside was a small folded piece of paper. "We received this late last night," he said. "It's a personal note, addressed to you." Emily reached for it, hesitantly. The paper felt fragile, like something important. She unfolded it. "To whomever gave me kindness without knowing my name, thank you. I've faced battlefields, hunger and grief, but your cup of coffee reminded me what it's all for. People like you still exist. Don't change. Tom." She stared at the note, then at the man across from her. "Is this from the man yesterday?" Hargrave nodded. "His name is Colonel Thomas Everett, retired United States Air Force, 32 years of service, most of it classified. He's received 3 Bronze Stars, a Silver Star, and the Medal of Honor. He's been off the radar for almost a decade." Emily's breath caught. "He came out of hiding last night," Hargrave continued, "walked into our regional office and handed this letter to me personally, said we needed to find the girl from the diner, said you reminded him of what peace feels like." "I didn't do anything," Emily whispered. "You gave him warmth when he had none, respect without recognition. That's more than most ever do." Emily looked down at the paper again. then folded it neatly and pressed it to her chest. Her throat was tight. Tears threatened at the corners of her eyes. "We've been trying to track Colonel Everett for years," Hargrave added. "He vanished from public view after his wife passed away. He refused interviews, medals, even the president's invitation to Arlington. We thought he was lost to the system, and he came back because I gave him coffee." Hargrave gave a rare, almost smile. "Yes." The bell over the door jingled again. A fourth SUV had arrived. Emily turned in her seat and froze. There, framed in the doorway with his coat still damp from the cold, stood the man from yesterday, Colonel Everett. But this time, he wasn't invisible. Everyone in the diner turned to look. He walked toward Emily slowly, the same cautious steps but with his shoulders straighter. His face was worn by time and war, but his eyes were clear. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said softly, stopping beside the booth. Emily stood. "Of course not." He reached into his coat and pulled out something unexpected, a small, square box. Inside, resting on a velvet cushion, was a folded American flag pin, slightly tarnished with age. "I was given this by a soldier who saved my life," he said. "I've never given it to anyone else." Emily's eyes widened. "But you," he paused, his voice shaking. "You reminded me of him, of the world we were fighting to protect." He placed the box on the table and gently pushed it toward her. "I just wanted to say thank you." Face to face. Emily stood frozen, unsure of what to say, as Colonel Everett gently placed the velvet box on the diner table. The folded American flag pin inside shimmered faintly under the ceiling lights, its surface worn, its history invisible, but heavy. She didn't reach for it, not yet. Something about the moment felt sacred. The diner was unnervingly quiet. Even the sizzle from the griddle in the kitchen seemed to dim into the background. A few customers had stopped mid-bite, watching the scene unfold like they were witnessing something rare, something fragile that shouldn't be interrupted. Colonel Everett slowly took the seat across from her, with Hargrave giving him a nod of respect before stepping aside. The two suited men maintained their positions at the entrance, eyes still scanning but less rigid than before. "I hope I didn't cause any trouble," Everett said, his voice rough but sincere. Emily shook her head. "You didn't. I don't understand any of this." "I know," he said quietly, "and I don't expect you to, but you should understand why I'm here." Emily glanced down at the box, then back at him. "That's yours. I can't take it." He nodded, slowly. "It was mine for a long time, but it was given to me by a young soldier in Afghanistan. He was 20, barely old enough to drink. We were caught in a firefight near a mountain checkpoint, pinned for 2 days. He never flinched, not once, kept everyone sane, kept us alive. And when we finally got out, I found that flag in my gear. No note, just the pin. I never found him again." There was a pause. Emily's hands tightened around the edge of the table. "I held onto it for years," he continued. "Kept it through deployments, hospitals, the funeral. But I swore if I ever met someone who reminded me why I wore the uniform in the first place, why we fought in the dirt and bled for ideals, I'd pass it on. You're that person." Emily's voice was barely audible. "I gave you coffee. You gave me dignity," he replied, eyes locking with hers. "You saw a man who looked lost and didn't look away. You didn't ask for a story. You didn't assume. You just gave." She swallowed hard. "I still don't think I deserve that." Everett smiled, but it was faint. "That's why you do." She reached out finally and closed the box gently with both hands. Her fingers lingered on the smooth velvet. It felt warm somehow, heavy despite its size. "I don't know what to say," she murmured. "You don't have to say anything." But Emily had 1,000 thoughts swirling in her mind, and one question she couldn't hold back. "Why did you disappear?" she asked. "If you were a hero, why leave everything behind?" Everett exhaled slowly and looked out the window. His reflection ghosted in the glass. "My wife Lillian was diagnosed with ALS 3 years after I retired. She deteriorated quickly. I couldn't save her, couldn't even slow it down. After she passed, the house felt like a mausoleum. The country didn't feel like home anymore. The medals, the honors, they felt meaningless. I had spent a lifetime in uniform and never learned how to live without it. Emily listened in silence, her chest tightening. "So," he said, turning back to her. "I drove. Town to town, state to state, no phone, no address. I left the army behind and tried to forget." He tapped a finger on the table. "But yesterday, you gave me something I didn't expect. A moment, a connection. You made me remember that. This country isn't just flags and speeches. It's people. Ordinary people doing good when no one's watching." Emily's eyes stung again. She blinked quickly. Hargrave stepped forward. "Colonel Everett has requested that the Department of Civil Affairs help initiate a private veterans outreach program. He wants it based here." Emily's brow furrowed. "Here? In Willow Creek?" Everett nodded. "I want to fund it myself. A place for forgotten soldiers, the invisible ones, where they can come without paperwork, without bureaucracy, just coffee, conversation, and kindness." Emily sat back stunned. "But why here?" He smiled. "Because here someone remembered me when the world forgot." Just then, Danny peeked out from the kitchen, breaking the intensity of the moment. "Y'all want coffee or what?" Emily laughed, nervously, tearfully, and nodded. Yeah, Danny, coffee sounds great." As he ducked back into the kitchen, Everett leaned toward Emily again, his tone softer. "I have one more thing for you." From his coat pocket, he pulled a weathered photograph, folded in quarters. He slid it across the table. Emily unfolded it carefully. The image was old, slightly yellowed. In it, a young man in fatigue stood beside a smiling woman, her hair dark, her eyes bright, her arm looped through his. In her hands, she held a baby girl, not older than 2. Emily's breath caught. "That's my wife," Everett said quietly. "Lillian." "And the girl." Emily's hands shook. "I don't know why," he continued, "but when I saw you yesterday, I couldn't stop thinking about her, about Lillian, about the girl. She was taken in by relatives when Lillian passed. I didn't think I'd see her again." Emily looked up, barely whispering. "Are you saying—" "I don't know," Everett said, his voice full of something between hope and sorrow. "But when I asked around this town last night, they said your mother's name was Lillian, Lillian Carter. Your mother died of ALS when you were a kid. And your records? They were sealed after adoption." Emily stared at him, heart pounding. "I'm not claiming anything," he said gently. "I'm just asking. Would you be willing to find out?" Emily sat still for a long moment, holding the faded photograph with both hands as if it might dissolve between her fingers. The baby in the image wore a tiny dress, her dark curls barely framing her soft, round face. She had a crooked little smile, wide and carefree. It was her. She knew it. Or she thought she knew. She looked up at Colonel Everett, who waited with a kind of patience that came only from decades of silence. His hands were folded gently on the table, his posture still, but his eyes were searching hers for something deeper than words. "I don't understand," she whispered. "My mum's name was Lillian Carter. She died when I was 5, that's all I ever knew. I was told she was single, that I never had a father." He nodded. "That's what your records say. We pulled them this morning. What was accessible?" "Anyway," Emily's chest tightened. "You looked me up?" Hargrave, standing nearby, stepped in carefully. "Ma'am, I assure you, this wasn't a breach of privacy. Colonel Everett requested a background check for confirmation. What we found was limited." "Limited?" she asked, voice tense. "The adoption files were sealed," he said. "No names, no agencies listed, only a legal reference number tied to a private firm in West Virginia. The final note on record indicated that the child, Emily Carter, was placed under the guardianship of a woman named Marla Whitaker." Emily's eyes widened. "Marla? She hadn't spoken that name in years. She was my mom's best friend," Emily said slowly. "After my mom died, she took me in. I lived with her until I was 17. "Do you still speak with her?" Everett asked. Emily hesitated. "We lost touch. She moved to Arizona a while back. Said she needed warmer weather for her arthritis. I haven't heard from her since." Hargrave pulled a slim notepad from his coat. "We can locate her, with your permission." Emily nodded slowly, the photo still resting between her palms. Everett leaned forward. "I'm not trying to push this on you, Emily. I don't want to disrupt your life. I never got closure. Lillian and I split during my final deployment. We never legally divorced, but she disappeared from the system. I only found out she had passed because a Veterans Affairs contact flagged her name in a death registry years later. Emily swallowed hard. Why didn't you look for me sooner? His face fell slightly. Because I thought she'd taken you somewhere safe. I assumed she'd remarried, maybe changed your name. I told myself it was better that way. I didn't want to reopen wounds she wanted closed. She sat in silence for a moment, her thoughts tangled in old shadows. She remembered Marla's tiny apartment, the chipped yellow linoleum, the scent of lavender soap. She remembered late nights sitting by the window staring at the stars, wondering why she felt hollow in a way no child should. She remembered asking once, only once, why her mother never spoke about her father. Marla had stared out the window for a long time and simply said, "Some people leave, Em. Some people get lost before they even go." And that was it. The end. Of the conversation. "I need to talk to her," Emily said firmly, standing up. "If anyone knows the truth, it's Marla." Everett nodded. "I understand." Hargrave stepped aside, speaking quietly into his radio. Emily didn't hear the words, but within minutes, one of the suited men returned with a tablet in hand. "Whitaker Marla Jean," he said. "Age 69, resides in Flagstaff, Arizona. We've secured a contact number and address. Would you like us to arrange a call?" Emily hesitated, then nodded. They brought the phone to her at the back of the diner, where she sat again, heart pounding, hands shaking as she pressed it to her ear. It rang once, twice, 3 times, then a click. A familiar, creaky voice filled the line. "Hello?" Emily froze. "Marla, it's me, Emily." A pause, then a soft breath. "Emily? Honey, is that you?" Tears welled up in her eyes. "Yeah, it's me." "My God, it's been years. I was just thinking about you last week. How are you, sweetheart?" "I'm okay," Emily said quickly, her throat tightening. "But I need to ask you something important." Marla was silent, as if bracing herself. Was he Colonel Thomas Everett?" Another pause. But this one stretched longer. The kind of silence that speaks louder than words. "Yes," she said finally, her voice cracking. "He was." Emily covered her mouth, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Your mum didn't want you to grow up in the military," Marla continued. "She loved him. God, did she love him. But after everything he'd been through overseas, she feared he'd never really come back. And when you were born, he was gone again. She told me she needed to disappear to protect you both." "Why didn't anyone tell me?" Emily asked, her voice shaking. "Because she made me promise not to," Marla whispered, "until the day someone came looking." Emily closed her eyes, and now he had. She ended the call minutes later, still trembling. Colonel Everett hadn't moved. He just watched her, waiting, silent, still that same patient presence. "It's true," she said softly, returning to the booth. "You're my father." He exhaled, slowly, heavily, as if letting go of something he'd been holding in. 4 decades. "I don't expect anything from you," he said. "I just wanted to know if you'd let me be part of your life, however small." Emily looked at the velvet box in front of her, the flag pin, the photo, the note, and then slowly she reached across the table and took his hand. "I think," she said, "we both deserve the chance to start again." The moment Emily took his hand, the entire diner seemed to pause. It wasn't dramatic or loud. No music swelled, no customers applauded, but something invisible shifted, like the air itself took a breath and held it. Colonel Everett's hand was warm, but the skin was dry and calloused, a roadmap of decades carved into its surface. He didn't grip her too tightly. He just held it gently, like it was a connection long overdue. They sat like that for a while, no words. Just a silence so full it spoke more than conversation ever could. "I don't know how to do this," Emily said finally. Everett's face softened. "Me neither." She laughed through her nose, wiping her eyes with the back of her free hand. "I never thought I'd have a father, let alone one that comes with military honors and SUVs and government escorts. He cracked a small smile. "I never thought I'd find peace in a diner." Their hands slowly parted, and Emily looked down at the photo again. Her mother looked so young, younger than Emily was now. And the child in her arms, full of life and untouched by the weight of the world, was a version of herself she barely remembered. "I want to know more," Emily said quietly. "About her, about you, about everything I missed." Everett nodded. "Then I'll tell you everything, as much as you want, the good and the bad." He paused, his voice low. "But there's something else I want to talk to you about too, something important." Emily tilted her head. "Okay." Hargrave stepped closer again, almost as if on cue. "With your permission, Emily, we'd like to involve you in the initial plans for the Veteran Outreach Center." Emily blinked. "Me?" Everett leaned forward. "It started with you. It should grow from you." She hesitated. "But I'm just a waitress. I don't know how to run a center. I don't know anything about veterans or trauma or any of that." Hargrave spoke with a firm kindness. "What you gave wasn't therapy or strategy. It was human. That's what we're missing. A place where veterans can sit down, drink coffee, and feel like they matter. We can handle the logistics. We just want you to be part of the soul of it." Emily looked at Everett again. "And you'd be here in Willow Creek?" He nodded. "If you'll have me." The idea spun in her mind. Her quiet life at the diner, her modest apartment, her few friends and routines, and now this. A ripple effect from a cup of coffee, growing into something that could touch dozens, maybe hundreds of lives. Where would it go? She asked. "There's an old auto shop 2 blocks down," Everett replied. "Vacant for years, good bones, needs work, but it's a start." "I know the one," Emily said. "Across from the old high school." "We already spoke with the owner this morning," Hargrave added. "He's willing to donate it. Said he had a brother who never made it back from Vietnam. That caught Emily off guard." "He wants to give it away?" Hargrave nodded. "Said it was time it served a better purpose." Emily sat back, absorbing everything. The air felt different, heavier but not suffocating, like something was waking up in her that she didn't know had been sleeping, a sense of purpose. She looked at Everett. "What would we call it?" He raised an eyebrow. "You tell me." She thought for a long moment, then she smiled. "The second cup." Everett smiled back. "Perfect." That afternoon, Emily didn't return to her usual shift. Linda covered for her without even asking. Danny gave her a lopsided thumbs up and mouthed, "You good?" She nodded. She and Everett spent the rest of the day walking through town together, not with any ceremony or spectacle, just 2 people reconnecting, or perhaps connecting for the first time. He told her stories in small fragments, about his unit, about missions in places she couldn't pronounce, about letters never sent, and medals never hung. She told him about her childhood, about Marla's second-hand dresses, school dances she skipped, the journal she kept hidden behind her mattress where she wrote letters to the dad she never knew. By sunset, they stood in front of the vacant auto shop. The windows were dusty, but behind the grime Emily could already imagine the space. Tables, sofas, bookshelves, a coffee counter like the one at Maple and Pine, a bulletin board covered in handwritten notes, job postings, and encouragement. A small stage in the corner for open mic nights or guest speakers. She saw it all as clear as day. "I don't know how to build this," she said honestly. "You don't have to do it alone," Everett replied. "I've spent a lifetime building walls. Maybe it's time we tear some down." She looked at him. "Do you think people will come?" "I think," he said, "people are just waiting for a reason." It started with an old broom and a single key. 3 days after the meeting at Maple and Pine, Emily unlocked the door to the vacant auto shop with trembling hands. Colonel Everett stood behind her, the same quiet presence he had been since that morning with the flag pin. The building smelled like dust, motor oil, and forgotten time. Sunlight slanted through narrow windows coated in grime, casting golden streaks across the floor. She stepped inside slowly, her boots echoing against the concrete. The space was larger than she remembered, wide open, with high ceilings and exposed beams. The remnants of a service counter stood in the corner, along with shelves full of rusted bolts, empty cans, and a half-torn poster from a 1998 baseball season. "Doesn't look like much," Emily said, arms crossed. Everett stepped in behind her. It looks like the beginning. There was something strange about standing in a place meant to be transformed. The air buzzed with potential and fear, because potential always came with pressure. People would expect something from her, from them, and what if she failed? I don't know the first thing about renovations, she admitted. That's what community is for, Everett replied, and community came, slowly at first. That afternoon, Danny arrived with a toolbox and an extra set of gloves. I can fix the front door hinge, he offered. It squeaks worse than Linda's knee. 2 hours later, Linda showed up with a bag full of cleaning supplies and a checklist. If we're going to serve coffee here, this place needs to be sanitary, enough for a health inspector's mother. By the weekend, more people joined in, locals who had lost brothers in Iraq, an old couple who used to run the VFW hall, and a teenager named Marcus who said his uncle came back from Afghanistan different. They swept, they scrubbed, they painted. Each brushstroke was a prayer. Each nail hammered was an echo of healing. Each small act was a promise. We're building something that matters. Emily worked non-stop. She took a temporary leave from Maple and Pine, pouring all her hours into the second cup. She created a vision board, big chalkboard in the main room, handwritten dreams scrawled in different colors, job postings, therapy nights, open mic, veterans. Stories wall, community garden, quiet room, honor meals, warm beds, a free second cup for every first-timer. Colonel Everett wasn't just involved. He was everywhere. He helped Marcus build bookshelves. He sat with grieving parents. He shared coffee with silent men who hadn't opened up in years. Emily watched as he transformed from someone fading into history to someone shaping the future. But not everyone was thrilled. On the morning of the first local press interview, Emily stepped outside the center to find a piece of cardboard nailed to the door. "We don't need charity here. Stick to serving coffee." Emily's stomach twisted. She pulled the sign down, hands shaking, and stormed back inside. Everett saw the look on her face and didn't ask. He simply followed her to the back room, where she sat down hard on a folding chair. "Some people don't want change," he said gently, "even when it's good." "I thought this town cared," Emily muttered. "I thought people wanted a place like this." "They do, most of them. But when something new comes, it forces everyone to look at what's missing. And not everyone's ready to admit there's a need." She sighed. "Do you think I made a mistake?" He knelt beside her. "You turned kindness into something permanent." "That's never a mistake." Later that day, Hargrave called. His voice was tense, a tone Emily hadn't heard from him since that first diner meeting. "We ran a final background check on the property owner," he said. "And we've got a problem." "What kind of problem?" Emily asked. "The auto shop is owned by a man named George Holston. He verbally agreed to donate the space, but there's a lien on the building. He didn't tell us." Emily's heart dropped. "How bad is it?" $42,000. The number hit like a punch. "He stopped paying property taxes 5 years ago," Hargrave continued. "Technically, the city owns it now, and unless we pay off the lien, the project's on hold." Emily slumped into the nearest chair. Why didn't he say anything? Pride or guilt or both? Everett stepped in. "We'll pay it. I can wire the money." Hargrave paused. "That's not the only complication. There's a city council vote coming up. A few members aren't thrilled with the idea of using public land for something unofficial." Emily rubbed her temples. "We're not asking for anything from them. They don't see it that way. They see traffic, crowds, outsiders." A silence fell over the room. Then Emily stood, slowly, deliberately. "We're not stopping," she said. "We'll raise the money. We'll speak at the meeting. We'll tell them what this place is and what it's already doing. They want a reason to doubt us. We'll give them a reason to believe." Everett smiled. "You sound like your mother." Emily blinked. "You think she'd be proud?" "I don't think," he said. "I know." The next morning, Emily stood in front of the old diner bathroom mirror, staring at herself like she was meeting someone new. Her eyes were tired but sharper, her posture more upright. She had never spoken at a town meeting before, never stood behind a podium, never been a face for anything beyond a coffee refill and a warm smile. Now somehow she was the beating heart of a mission. The vote that could change everything would happen in 4 days. Until then, every second mattered. The lien over the auto shop hovered like a thundercloud. $42,000. They had managed to raise just under $5. Locals had stepped in with small donations. $10 here, $20 there, even a bucket labeled "Fuel the Second Cup" on the counter. Of Maple and Pine was collecting loose change like hope in coin form. But it wasn't enough, so Emily did something she never imagined she'd do. She stood in front of a crowd. They organized a small fundraiser in the community center. The old gymnasium had been repurposed with string lights, plastic chairs, and a microphone duct taped to a music stand. Everett wore his dress uniform for the first time in years. His medals caught the light like small suns. People came out of curiosity, some out of skepticism. The town had seen a lot of ideas come and go, but few stuck. Emily took the mic. "I'm not here to tell you what you owe," she began, voice trembling slightly. "I'm here to remind you what we're capable of when we remember each other." She told them the story of the man in the booth, the coffee, the note, the flag pin. She didn't cry, not this time. She told it with clarity, with truth, with the power of someone who had lived it. And then she stepped back. Everett stepped forward. He didn't speak loudly. He didn't need to. "I've worn this uniform in 7 countries, he said. "But I've never been more afraid than I was the day I walked into that diner, because I thought the world had forgotten me." He paused. The room held its breath. "But she didn't," he said, nodding toward Emily. "And that's what the second cup is about. Remembering people, serving people, healing them, not with speeches or charity, but with presence." The room was silent. Then someone clapped, then another. And then the whole gymnasium stood up, the sound like thunder rolling through a valley of hesitation. By the end of the night, they had raised 3,000 more, still far from the goal. But something else had been secured, public support. And that would prove more powerful than money. The following day, a letter arrived, a manila envelope with no return address. Emily opened it behind the counter of Maple and Pine, hands covered in flour from helping Linda with biscuits. Inside was a crisp check and a handwritten note on thick stationery. "I watched your fundraiser online. I haven't spoken about my brother in years. He took his life last winter. You reminded me he mattered. I don't know if this fixes anything, but maybe it helps. See." The check was for $25,000. Emily dropped into a chair. Tears slipped down her cheeks in silence. She showed the note to Everett, who read it once and closed his eyes for a long moment. "We don't know who C is," he said, "but we just gave them back something they thought they'd lost. That's what this place does, before it even opens." With the donation, they were only 9,000 short. Momentum returned. Local radio stations mentioned the campaign. The high school's drama club planned a benefit play. The bakery offered a percentage of weekend sales. Everyone was leaning in, but not everyone was cheering. 2 days before the vote, Emily was called to speak informally with a member of the city council, a woman named Diane Holloway. They met in the back of the library, seated among rows of paperback novels and dusty encyclopedias. "I've read the articles," Diane said. "I've seen the videos, and I'll be honest, I think what you're doing is beautiful. But not everyone agrees." Emily stayed calm. "What's the concern?" "Some believe the second cup will attract veterans with problems, PTSD, violence, substance abuse, that it will bring instability." Emily's voice remained steady. "Do you believe that?" Diane hesitated. "I believe pain needs a place to go, but the town is scared, and scared people vote no." Emily leaned forward. "Then let's show them that healing looks like courage, not chaos." The councilwoman smiled faintly. "You sound like someone who's found her purpose." "I have," Emily said. That night, Everett knocked on her apartment door. She opened it to find him holding a small wooden box. "I wasn't sure when to give you this," he said, "but now feels right." Inside the box was a bundle of old letters, tied with twine. "I wrote them during your childhood. Never mailed them. I didn't know where you were, but I wrote every year on your birthday." Emily picked one up. The date, May 4th, 2004. She opened it. "Emily, I don't know what color your eyes are anymore. I don't know if you like soccer or science or if you still hate spinach like your mom did, but I hope you're laughing. I hope someone hugs you every day. I hope you feel safe. I hope you're not alone. Love. Dad. Tears slid down Emily's cheeks and she didn't wipe them away. Everett looked at her carefully. No matter how this vote goes, you've already built something that no one can take. She nodded. But we're not done yet. The sun rose slowly over Willow Creek on the morning of the city council vote. The sky was thick with grey clouds, and the wind carried the kind of chill that crept under your collar and settled in your chest. Emily stood outside the second cup, holding her breath, watching the town move like it did every morning, as if nothing monumental was about to happen, but she felt it in her bones. Inside, Colonel Everett was reviewing his prepared remarks. Linda was arranging a tray of muffins as a gesture for council members. Danny kept pacing, muttering about how politicians always find a way to ruin good things. Even Marcus showed up early, carrying a hand-painted sign that read, "This place saved my uncle. Let it save others." At 9:47 a.m. they walked together toward the town hall. The building stood like a courthouse from a black-and-white movie, brick worn with ivy crawling up one side and the American flag rippling above. Emily had passed by it 1,000 times in her life, never once imagining she'd stand before its full assembly with so much on the line. The council chamber was already packed. Locals filled the benches. Cameras were set up in the back, and even a few journalists from the county newspaper took notes. At the far end of the room, beneath a seal of the town, sat the 7 members of the council, 5 men, 2 women, all wearing neutral expressions and holding pens like swords. The room quieted as the meeting was called to order. Diane Holloway gave Emily a small nod from the end of the bench. It was the only visible sign of support from the table. As names were called, reports read, and other business handled, Emily barely heard any of it. Her hands were clenched in her lap. Everett, beside her, placed one hand gently over hers. "No matter what happens," he whispered, "you've already won." Then it was time. "Next item," announced the chairman. Proposal 16B. Temporary waiver of municipal lien on property located at 229 Willow Avenue for use as a veteran and community support center under the name The Second Cup. The floor is open for statements. Emily stood. She stepped to the podium and looked out at the room. Her heart thundered. Her voice, when it came, was soft but steady. 3 months ago I served coffee to a man I didn't know. He didn't ask for help. He didn't share. See his story. But he needed something, and I had something to give. She told them the story, again, but this time she told it differently. She told it not just with truth, but with authority. She spoke as someone who had lived the journey, who had lost and found and rebuilt. She spoke of the flag pin, the letter, the faces that walked through the second cup every day, even before the doors were officially open. She spoke of grief, of hope, of what it means to be invisible, and then be seen. When she finished, the room was silent. Then Everett stood beside her. "I served 32 years in uniform," he said. "But I've only just begun to serve. Without it. This idea came from a cup of coffee. But it's not about caffeine, it's about connection, it's about home." He stepped back. Diane Holloway stood next, echoing her support. Then a man named Councilman Sharp, grey-haired, frowning, took the microphone. "I sympathize," he began, "but I've spoken with several constituents who fear what this will bring. Traffic, noise, mental instability. Veterans are not. Without their issues, let's be honest." A quiet gasp spread through the room. Emily's jaw tightened. Everett's hand clenched into a fist. Sharp continued, "We all respect service, but respect doesn't mean sacrificing safety or peace." Emily stood again. "With all due respect, Councilman, peace isn't the absence of people in pain. It's the presence of those willing to help carry it." The room murmured in agreement. Then someone rose from the audience. A tall woman with sharp features and a hard tone. "My name is Rebecca Lang. My daughter lives 2 blocks from that building. She's 9. I don't want her walking by a place where broken men gather." Emily's chest went hollow. Before she could respond, A man in the back, an older veteran in a tan jacket, and stood up. "I was one of those broken men," he said, "until I walked into the second cup. And for the first time in 10 years, someone remembered my name. That cracked something open. One by one, others stood. A woman whose brother had returned from Iraq with night terrors. A father whose son took his own life after discharge. A teenager who said he'd never seen his uncle smile until 2 weeks ago. By the end of it, half the room was standing. But just as Emily began to hope again, someone delivered a final blow. A man stepped forward and placed a printed photo on the desk. "This was Emily Davis 10 years ago," he said. "She was arrested for shoplifting. Is this the kind of person we want heading up a city-endorsed center?" Gasps echoed. Emily's stomach dropped. Her face drained of color. The photo was real. She remembered the day. 17, scared, broke. A desperate mistake, one she had buried and never spoken of again. "I paid for that mistake," she said, stepping back to the mic. "I did community service. I went to court. I've never hidden it. I just moved forward. And now," she added, "I give coffee to strangers without asking for their pasts, because I know how it feels to be defined by your worst moment." Silence again. Then Everett stepped beside her. "She's more than that photo," he said. "She's the reason I'm alive." For a long moment after Colonel Everett spoke, the room sat in breathless silence. Not uncomfortable, not awkward, but reverent. As if everyone present knew they had witnessed something unrepeatable. Two people refusing to let the weight of shame steal the meaning of grace. Emily stood still at the podium. Her eyes burned, but no tears came. She wasn't crying. Not anymore. She was done apologizing for who she used to be. The council chair cleared his throat. "We will now proceed to the vote." Pens scratched paper. A tension thicker than air filled the chamber. Emily held Everett's hand tightly. Her fingers, though still trembling, no longer shook from fear, but from anticipation. Each name was called. Councilwoman Holloway. Aye. Councilman Sharp. A pause. Sharp's eyes met Emily's. There was something unreadable in his expression. Disappointment, maybe, or guilt. Then he looked down. Aye. A soft wave of surprise moved through the room. Even Everett raised. An eyebrow, another vote, then another. 3 ayes, 1 abstention, 2 remaining. The final councilman adjusted his glasses. "I have my reservations," he said. "But I've seen too many people in this town forgotten after their uniforms came off. I vote aye." Emily could barely breathe. The chairman glanced around the room. 5 in favor, 1 abstention, 1 opposed. He gavelled the desk. Motion. Passed. The room erupted, not loud, not wild, but full of emotion, relief, gratitude. People clapped, some cried, a few hugged, others simply placed hands over their hearts in quiet reverence. It was a release, of fear, of grief, of doubt. Emily didn't move. She stood there, frozen in time, feeling the world shift under her feet, as if the ground she once walked, where she was invisible, uncertain, unseen, had given way to solid, sacred earth. Everett turned toward her. "You did it." "No," she said softly. "We did." Later that night, the crowd thinned, the press left, and the town hall lights dimmed. Emily and Everett walked back to the second cup beneath, a sky of silver stars. Each step felt different, lighter, as if she had finally laid down the weight she had been dragging behind her for years. The wind was cooler now. Fall was beginning to show in the air, and leaves rattled down empty sidewalks like forgotten prayers. Inside, the center, the light above the front window flickered. They didn't bother fixing it yet. It was the one imperfection Emily liked, a reminder that healing doesn't need to be polished to be real. Linda was inside, wiping down counters. Danny was tuning a donated guitar that would be used for open mic night. Marcus was pinning the day's newspaper to the wall of progress near the entrance. The headline read, "From Shame to Shelter, How a Waitress and a War Hero Changed." Willow Creek. Emily stepped into the quiet space. It already smelled like hope. Old books, fresh coffee, and lemon cleaner. A kind of holy trinity in places like this. Hargrave arrived shortly after with news. "We traced the anonymous donor," he said. The one who sent the 25,000. Emily tilted her head. And, Hargrave smiled, Carolyn Jennings, sister of Private Timothy Jennings. He served with Everett in 2003, took his life last December. Carolyn watched your speech and said it gave her the first full night of sleep she's had in a year. Emily covered her mouth. I wish I could thank her. You just did, Hargrave replied. 2 days later, the second cup held its soft opening. No balloons, no ribbon, cutting. Just open doors, warm coffee, and chairs that welcomed without question. The first to arrive was a man named Richard Boone, a Vietnam vet, who sat quietly at the corner table and said nothing for 45 minutes. Then he asked if they had cinnamon. They see. Second was a young woman in army fatigues who hadn't spoken to her family in months. She didn't order anything, just sat by the bookshelf, flipping through poetry until her shoulders relaxed for the first time in days. The third was a man in a wheelchair who didn't drink coffee but said he liked the sound of people talking again. He listened for hours and left a thank you note in the suggestion box. By noon, the place was half full. People didn't just visit, they stayed. They lingered. They opened up. A father told his son for the first time about what he'd seen in Fallujah. A daughter showed a faded photo of her mother in uniform. A stranger offered a ride home to another stranger. Stories passed between tables like lifelines. Emily moved through the space like she was born to be there. Not as a manager, not as a savior, but as someone who had found her place, in service, in story, in silence. She stood by the front counter and noticed the photograph pinned to the corkboard, the one of her mother holding her as a baby. Next to it was a note from Everett, newly added in pen. For Lillian, who knew love meant building something that outlives you. Emily touched the frame gently. She was no longer the girl who lived in quiet corners and forgotten booths. She was a woman who had rebuilt her name, her family and her faith, not in religion but in people. That night, before locking up, Everett found her sitting in one of the new chairs near the window, watching the street in silence. "Can I ask you something?" she said. He nodded. "If she were here," Emily whispered, "do you think Mom would have come?" Everett sat beside her. "Lillian would have opened the place with you. She would have had the idea before I ever did." Emily smiled. "You really loved her. Still do." They sat like that for a while, neither speaking, just sharing the weight of what had been lost and the miracle of what had been found. And when they turned off the lights and walked outside, the sign above the door glowed gently in the night. The second cup, a place to begin again. 1. Year later, the bell above the door still chimed the same. Emily stepped inside the second cup just before sunrise, as she had done every morning for the past 365 days. The ritual wasn't for duty or obligation. It was for grounding, for gratitude, for remembering the place had changed. It had grown. Where once there were bare walls, now hung photographs, thank you notes, framed news articles, and dozens of hand-pinned ribbons from uniforms across generations. In the back room, shelves were full of donated books. A small, quiet corner had become sacred ground for those needing peace. The coffee station had expanded to include tea, cocoa, and even protein shakes. But the heart had stayed the same. Emily walked over to the Wall of Firsts, a section where guests wrote the first time they felt safe, or heard, or human again. First night I didn't have a nightmare. First time. Someone remembered my name. First hug in 15 years. First time I believed I mattered. Tears welled up in her eyes, not from sorrow, but from reverence. She poured herself a cup of coffee and walked to the corner booth. His booth, the same one where Colonel Everett had sat that very first morning. The surface had been re-varnished, but the crack in the wood was still there, the same one he made when he accidentally dropped his cup and laughed for 5 straight minutes like a man who had forgotten how. She kept that crack, told the carpenter to leave it. "It's the soul of the table," she said. Everett wasn't here anymore, not in body. He had passed away 3 months earlier, peacefully, in his sleep. Emily had been at his side. So had Linda, Marcus, Danny. A nurse who'd served 2 tours in the Navy cried harder than anyone, but Everett had died with his boots off and his heart open. Before he passed, he left Emily a box with a note that read, "Open on our anniversary, not before." That morning she opened it. Inside were mementos, the original velvet box with the flag pin. Now preserved under glass, a snapshot of her mother Lillian, standing beside a young Everett at a dance, laughing mid-spin, a pocket Bible with a note inside. "For strength on the days you question everything." A sealed letter. She opened it slowly. "My Emily, you gave me a second life. You gave this town one too. I came here invisible, and you made me seen. I came here haunted, and you gave me peace. This place, this movement, was never mine. It always belonged to the kind stranger who offered a cup of coffee to an old man with nothing to give in return. Keep giving, even when it's hard, especially then. You were my second cup. You always will be. Love forever." Dad. Emily pressed the letter to her chest, closed her eyes and exhaled. The center opened at 7 a.m. By 7:10 it was buzzing. A young Marine helped a retired Air Force pilot fill out a resume. A mother sat beside her teenage son, both clutching matching mugs. In the therapy room, soft piano music played under quiet conversation. So a man who had never said a word in 3 months finally whispered, "Thank you." By noon, a local news team arrived to film a special segment. The second cup had quietly gained national attention, not for flashy programs or corporate donations, but for the stories, the healing, the people. A small group from a neighboring town came to observe. "We want to start one of these where we live," their leader said. Emily gave them the entire blueprint. No conditions. "Kindness isn't something you franchise," she smiled. "You pass it forward." That afternoon she hosted a small writing circle for women veterans. One of them, a 22-year-old named Grace, asked shyly if she could read aloud a poem she'd written the night before. "I was lost in the noise until someone brewed silence, until someone said, 'You matter,' without asking my name. And now, I carry it with me, not like weight, but like warmth. The cup that came after the broken one. My second chance." No one spoke for a long time after that. At sunset, Emily stepped outside for air. Marcus was locking his bike nearby. He was taller now, stronger, but the kindness in his eyes remained unchanged. He walked up beside her. 2, cups in hand. "Thought you might want this," he said. She took it. "Still adding too much sugar?" "Absolutely." They stood in silence, sipping slowly. The air was crisp, golden. The town, once indifferent, now hummed with connection. "You ever think about how crazy this is?" he asked. "All of it? Where it started?" Emily nodded. "Every day." "What's next?" he asked. She smiled. "The next person who walks through that door." He looked over at the sign above the entrance, softly glowing in the twilight, the E, second cup, a place to begin. Again later that night, Emily sat alone at the booth, one lamp lit above her. The window reflected her face beside Everett's photo. She whispered softly, "To the man who walked in with nothing and left me everything." Then she raised her mug. "To the second cup, and to all the ones that follow." If this story touched something inside you, take a moment before you go. Leave a comment and let us know what it meant to you. Your words matter here. And if you believe that stories like this can bring light, healing and reflection to someone else's day, consider subscribing to the channel and giving the video a like. It's through your support that we're able to keep sharing moments that remind us of the power of quiet kindness and the beauty of second chances.